The storm outside raged across the barren valley, shaking the old shelter that Elias had built with his own hands. He had lived alone for years on this forgotten frontier world, where the nights were long, and the wind carried dust across the empty plains. For Elias, it was a life of routine, repairing equipment, tending to his small crops, and making sure the generators kept the lights alive. He thought nothing would ever disturb the quiet isolation he had chosen. But that night, everything changed. Through the howling of the wind, a faint sound broke into his ears. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of the storm, but then he heard it again. A weak, desperate cry. His heart tensed, and he reached for the old rifle mounted near the door. Visitors were rare, and in these lands they were usually trouble. He unsealed the heavy metal hatch and stepped out into the biting cold. At the edge of the floodlights, he saw a figure stumbling forward. The shape was small at first, then grew clearer as lightning cut the sky. A tall figure wrapped in a cloak staggered through the mud, carrying something close to their chest. When the figure fell to their knees, Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. His instinct told him to stay cautious, but the storm would kill anyone left outside for long. "Stay where you are," Elias shouted, his voice carried by the wind. The figure raised a trembling hand, pulling back the cloak just enough for him to see. A pale face, not human, looked up at him with pleading eyes. The skin shimmered faintly in the rain, with markings that glowed dimly under the storm's flashes. Clutched tightly in her arms was a small bundle, a child barely breathing, wrapped in thin cloth. "Please, shelter," the figure said in broken words, her voice weak and cracking. She leaned forward, her strength failing. Elias froze, torn between fear and compassion. He had heard stories of alien travelers, but never seen one with his own eyes. Most people avoided this world for a reason. Whoever she was, she didn't belong here. Yet the desperation in her voice struck him deeper than the storm's cold bite. He lowered his weapon slowly and rushed forward. The woman collapsed into his arms, her body light but trembling with exhaustion. The child in her arms whimpered softly, eyes shut tight. Without another thought, Elias carried them both inside, sealing the hatch behind him. The warmth of the shelter wrapped around them as he laid her carefully on the cot. The child stirred, letting out a weak cry. Elias quickly moved to fetch a blanket and wrapped the little one, his hands moving with a care he didn't know he still had. He had never been a father, but something about the tiny life struck a chord deep inside him. The woman tried to sit up, her hand reaching out as if to take the child back. "Safe," she whispered, her words unsure. "You're safe," Elias said firmly, though his heart was still racing. "No one will hurt you here. Rest." Her eyes searched his face as though she could not believe his words. Slowly, she let her head fall back against the pillow. Her cloak fell open, revealing strange attire beneath, marked with symbols Elias didn't understand. He noticed a thin band of metal around her wrist, glowing faintly as though broken or drained of power. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously, keeping his voice steady. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Only after a long pause did she whisper again, "No time." "Hunters, they follow." Her hand clutched the blanket tightly around the child. "Please protect," Elias frowned. "Hunters?" He glanced at the scanner near the door, but it showed nothing unusual, just the storm raging outside. Whoever chased her must have been far away or hidden. Still, he could see the fear in her eyes. She had traveled far, carrying a child through hell, and had chosen his small shelter as the place to beg for mercy. He sat back, staring at her as the storm pounded against the walls. He could turn them out. He could send them back into the night, pretend he had never seen them. That would keep him safe, alone as he always had been. But when he looked at the small child's face, pale and fragile, something inside him hardened. "You can stay," Elias said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "Whoever you are, whatever you're running from, you'll have shelter here." The woman's eyes glistened as if tears threatened to fall. She tried to speak again but was too weak. Instead, she bowed her head, clutching the child to her chest. The faint glow of the markings on her skin pulsed gently, as though her body relaxed at last. Within moments, exhaustion overcame her, and both mother and child drifted into a fragile sleep. Elias sat in silence, staring at the pair. His world had been quiet, predictable, and lonely. Now, within one stormy night, he found himself protector of a strange alien princess, or perhaps just a desperate mother, and her child. Whatever they were, he knew his life would never be the same again. Outside, The storm screamed, but inside the shelter, Elias felt something stronger than fear, the weight of responsibility, and the stir of a choice that would shape not only his life, but perhaps something far greater. Elias did not sleep that night. The storm outside had calmed to a steady rain, but inside his shelter, questions kept his mind awake. Who was the strange woman? Why was she being hunted? And why had fate brought her and her child to his door? He sat by the generator's faint hum, keeping his eyes on the cot where she rested. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The child stirred now and then, letting out small sounds that made Elias rise every time, checking to see if it was hungry or cold. He brought warmed water, soaked a cloth, and gently placed it near the child's lips. To his surprise, the little one accepted it, calming down. Elias felt an odd warmth in his chest as he watched the child settle back into sleep. By morning, the woman's eyes opened again. They were strange, like pools of light, with faint lines glowing faintly across her skin. She tried to rise, but her body trembled too much. Elias quickly set down the tool he had been cleaning and stepped closer. "Don't push yourself," he said. "You're safe here, at least for now." She looked around, confusion clear on her face, as though the simple metal walls of the shelter were alien to her. Her gaze finally returned to him. "You human?" she asked slowly. "That's right," Elias replied. "Name's Elias, and you?" She hesitated, clutching her child tightly. After a long pause, she whispered, "Salith." Her voice carried both pride and exhaustion. She touched the child's head softly. "My son last." "Of line." "Line?" Elias asked, unsure what she meant. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she spoke again, her words were clearer than the night before, though broken. "I am heir, princess, my people. Fallen, enemies hunt. They want end of bloodline." Elias blinked, stunned by her words. A princess? From some empire he had never even heard of. He stared at her torn cloak and the faint glow of the band on her wrist. It seemed too grand a claim for someone so broken and desperate, yet something in her tone told him she spoke the truth. "You're saying they'll come here? To this world?" Elias asked, his hand tightening on the edge of the cot. Salith nodded weakly. "They follow. They never stop." Her eyes darkened with fear. "If they find us, my son dies. And me." Elias paced the room, running a hand through his hair. He had lived alone for years, far from human politics, far from wars and empires. He had chosen this forgotten place because no one came here, and yet now he had a hunted alien princess and her child in his care. "You should have gone to the human colonies," he muttered. "Too far." Salith whispered, "We run, no ship, only escape pod. Found this world. No choice." She looked at him, her glowing eyes desperate. "I beg, protect for child. If nothing else." "Protect." Her voice broke at the end, and she bowed her head. Elias felt a weight pressing on his chest. He could see she was prepared to die, but for her child's sake she still begged. He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Listen, I don't know what I can do against whoever's after you. I'm no soldier, just a farmer, a miner, whatever keeps this place running, but..." He glanced at the small boy who slept peacefully against her shoulder. "I won't let them take him. Not while I'm still breathing." For a moment, silence filled the shelter. Then for the first time, Salith's eyes softened, her fear shifting into something else. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of it. She nodded slowly. "Then you are more than soldier. You are human." Elias almost laughed at the strange words, but held it in. He saw her meaning. To her, humanity was not weakness, but something deeper, something strong. The day passed with quiet work. Elias checked the scanners, adjusted the defenses, and repaired an old drone that hadn't flown in years. Salith watched him from the cot, holding her child close. At times, she asked simple questions about the shelter, about the land outside, about why he lived here alone. Elias answered with short words, but slowly, the silence between them grew less heavy. By evening, Salith spoke again, her voice steady. "Elias, you wonder, why me run, why hunted?" He turned toward her, curious. "My people, once proud, we had empire, but pride, too great. Enemies came, we fall, betrayal inside. Now only few remain scattered, but my son, he carries key. His blood holds code to ancient vault. With that, enemies fear him, they want..." End of his life, Elias tried to understand. He didn't know much about alien empires or codes hidden in bloodlines, but he did understand the core of it. A mother and child hunted because of what they represented. It made his anger stir. "They'll have to come through me first," he said simply. That night, as the stars shone cold above the desert plains, Elias stood at the edge of his shelter, rifle slung over his shoulder. His scanners showed nothing yet, no sign of ships or pursuers. But deep down he knew Salith was right. Hunters were coming. He looked back at the shelter where a mother and child rested. For the first time in years, his lonely home had meaning beyond survival. He no longer lived only for himself. Now he had a promise to keep. And Elias was a man who never broke promises. The next morning, the sky above Elias's remote settlement glowed with a pale light. For a moment he thought the storm had returned, but it was something else entirely. Sensors began to pick up faint signatures in orbit, ships moving too fast, too precise to be anything natural. Elias squinted at the readings, his heart sinking. The hunters were close. Salith stirred from her cot, sensing the change in the air. "They come," she whispered. Her voice was calm, but her hands clutched the child tightly. Elias moved beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "They won't find you here," he said firmly. "Not if we plan right." She looked at him, hope flickering in her glowing eyes. "You think so?" "I have to try," Elias replied. He stood and went to his tools, pulling down crates of old drones, mining explosives and wires. The shelter was small, but it had tunnels and hidden nooks, perfect for traps if he could use them well. Salith watched, curiosity mixing with fatigue. "Human, clever. I thought." "Weak, but you—" "Different," Elias shrugged, focusing on his work. "We survive with brains, not muscle. That's what humans do." Hours passed in tense preparation. He patched holes in the shelter walls, rewired the security system to trigger alarms and lights, and rigged old mining equipment into makeshift traps around the property. Salith helped where she could, her hands guided by instinct. Though she was exhausted, she insisted on assisting, placing small energy sensors at key points, careful not to trigger them herself. The child slept peacefully between them, unaware of the danger circling above. Elias stole glances at the small face and felt determination harden within him. Whoever came would not take this child. Not while he was here. By mid-afternoon, the first signs of the hunters became visible. A dark speck moved across the sky, growing larger with each passing moment. Then another and another. Their shapes were alien to Elias, sleek and angular, with engines that glimmered in the pale sunlight. "They are scouts," Salith whispered, voice tense. "Looking, searching." Elias nodded. "Then we make sure they don't land easily." He moved to a control panel, activating the remote traps he had set around the terrain. Hidden turrets whirred to life. Mines were armed, and automated drones began patrolling the area, scanning for intruders. Salith studied the preparations, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "No empire. Ever thought humans could defend like this? Never underestimate anyone," Elias said simply, "especially someone protecting their home and a child." As the first scout ship descended, Elias triggered a small explosion along a false path, diverting the ship's sensors. The craft hesitated, its instruments confused, giving Elias precious minutes to reposition his drones. The alien vessel fired a scanning pulse, but it bounced off his decoys and traps, leaving the hunters uncertain. Salith's hands shook slightly, but she remained calm, guiding Elias as he set another tripwire. "Smart human," she murmured. "Like wind, unseen, strong." The tension built as the remaining ships hovered above, analyzing, coordinating. Elias could see their lights searching for a heat signature, scanning for movement. He adjusted the last of his equipment, double-checking the sensors and lights. The smallest mistake could reveal the shelter. Hours passed, and the sun dipped toward the horizon. Shadows stretched across the barren valley, and the alien ships continued their silent patrol. Elias finally allowed himself a short breath. "We've slowed them down," he said. "But they won't give up. We have to be ready if they land." Salith nodded. "Then we fight." The word left her lips softly, but the meaning was clear. She was no longer just a hunted princess. She was a mother determined to protect her child, and now, for the first time, she trusted Elias enough to stand beside him. As night fell, the valley grew quiet, but the presence of the hunters was like a shadow over everything. Elias and Salith shared a small meal, mostly silence between them, but an understanding grew. This night would not be peaceful, but together they could face what came. Elias stood at the shelter entrance, scanning the sky. The ships moved in calculated patterns, their glowing engines faint against the darkness. He felt a surge of pride, not for himself but for the human spirit, to fight, to survive, to protect when it mattered most. Salith approached, holding the child. She placed a hand on Elias's arm. "Tomorrow. They come," she said quietly. "We will see. Human courage." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of the coming battle. "We will," he said firmly. "No one takes your son. Not while I'm here. Not while we stand together." The night stretched long, filled with the hum of technology and the occasional distant sound of alien ships above. But inside the small shelter, Elias, Salith, and her child found a fragile peace. They knew the hunters would not wait forever. And when they arrived, the human ingenuity, courage, and stubbornness would be the shield that protected them. Outside, the stars twinkled coldly, silent witnesses to a quiet war about to begin. Inside, a human and an alien princess prepared for the fight of their lives, bound together by necessity, trust, and the hope that humanity could stand against impossible odds. The first light of dawn barely touched the jagged horizon when Elias heard the faint hum of engines descending into the valley. He moved quietly through the shelter, checking his traps and weapons one last time. Every sensor and drone was online, every explosive armed. The alien ships had landed, and their occupants began to spread across the terrain. Salith clutched her child tightly, standing behind him. Her eyes glowed softly, reflecting fear but also a steely determination. They are close," she whispered. Elias nodded without speaking. His mind raced through every possible scenario. The mercenaries were trained killers, far superior in technology and numbers, but he had something they did not: knowledge of the land and human ingenuity. The first group of hunters appeared at the edge of the clearing. Sleek armored suits glinted under the rising sun and energy weapons were held ready. They paused as the automated drones activated, whirring across the valley and scanning for movement. Elias waited, holding his breath. A low rumble erupted from the traps he had set. Mines detonated in precise locations, throwing dirt and rock into the air, creating chaos and confusion. The hunters staggered, shielding their eyes. From hidden positions, small turrets he had rigged fired bursts of electrical charges, knocking out sensors on their suits. Salith gasped, but Elias kept calm. "Remember, stay behind me," he whispered. "Do not show yourself until I say." The hunters regrouped quickly, demonstrating the experience and coordination of trained soldiers. They moved as a unit, scanning systematically for the source of the traps. Elias had anticipated this. He triggered another set of explosives along a false path, drawing half the squad away from the shelter. Rocks and debris erupted, creating the illusion of movement and forcing them to split their focus. Salith watched him in awe, realizing that the human she had once thought fragile could manipulate the environment in ways she could not imagine. "Clever human," she murmured. "Like predator, unseen." The first team stumbled into another trap, a series of concealed nets that lifted them off the ground, holding them in place as drones delivered small but painful shocks. The remaining hunters fired cautiously, unsure where Elias might strike next. He moved swiftly, using every advantage the terrain offered, hitting exposed systems with well-aimed shots from his rifle, disabling some of their technology. Despite the chaos, the hunters were relentless. They advanced with caution, coordinating their movements and using small hovering drones to scan for hidden threats. Elias realized that this was only the beginning. He needed to buy time, and he needed to protect Salith and her child above all else. "Follow me," he whispered, grabbing Salith's arm and guiding her through a hidden side tunnel that led beneath the shelter. The child nestled against her chest, unaware of the danger above. Dust and debris fell from the explosions, but the tunnels offered cover, and Elias knew every corner. From below they could hear the hunters' frustrated commands and the sounds of machines struggling against the traps. Elias paused, catching his breath. "We slowed them down, but they'll regroup." "This is just the first wave," Salith nodded, determination hardening in her expression. "Then we fight," she said quietly. The glow in her eyes was no longer just fear. It was resolve. "For my son, I will fight." Elias smiled faintly, appreciating her courage. "Good, you'll need it. They don't give up easily." As the hunters pressed on, Elias led Salith to a concealed observation point, where they could see the chaos unfolding above. Some of the mercenaries had fallen into his traps, while others were disabled temporarily. It was enough to give them a sense of control, but the battle was far from over. Hours passed, and the hunters tried to regroup, but Elias's ingenuity kept them off balance. Every trap forced them to pause, rethink, and waste time, exactly what he needed. From his hidden position, he could see the determination on Salith's face, a mixture of fear and pride. By nightfall, the hunters had taken casualties and withdrawn slightly, wary of further traps. Elias used the lull to reinforce the shelter and tend to Salith and her child. The small family huddled together, exhausted but alive. "You were amazing," Salith said softly. "No empire could have done this. Only human can survive like this." Elias shrugged. "I just used what I had. That's all humans ever do. We make do, and we fight for those who can't fight themselves." For the first time, Salith smiled faintly. She looked at her child and then at Elias. "You are not just protector, you are hope." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Tomorrow the hunters would return stronger, more prepared. But tonight they survived. Tonight, a human had stood against trained alien mercenaries and held his ground. Outside, the stars shone quietly over the valley, indifferent to the struggle below. Inside, a fragile sense of unity grew. A human, an alien princess and her child bound together by trust, courage, and the will to survive. And as Elias watched over them, he realized that this was only the beginning. The storm had passed, but the war was just starting, and humanity would stand to protect the desperate no matter the cost. The night was quiet, but inside the shelter, the small group felt the tension of the day weighing heavily on them. Elias moved carefully among his makeshift defenses, checking the systems, repairing minor damages, and keeping watch over the tunnels. Salith sat nearby, her child sleeping safely in her arms. The small boy stirred occasionally, making soft sounds that broke through the tension, and Elias found himself smiling despite the danger. "You don't sleep much," Salith said softly, her voice almost a whisper. She had regained some energy, though fatigue still shadowed her glowing eyes. "I need to make sure you and him are safe," Elias replied. "Tomorrow the hunters will come again, and I don't want them to catch us off guard." Salith studied him for a moment, her curiosity overcoming her exhaustion. "You fight for me? For child? You do not know us. You could leave, but you—" "Stay," Elias shook his head. "Humans protect those who need help. That's what we do. You're desperate, yes, but that doesn't make you worthless. And I can't ignore a child." Her expression softened, a rare vulnerability showing through the glowing patterns on her skin. "No empire ever cared like this, only fear. Or power." She paused, then added quietly, "I did not think humans could care so much." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the gentle hum of the generators and the occasional creak of the shelter settling. Elias realized that this small moment of calm was rare, maybe the only one they would have before the next attack. The child began to stir more actively, reaching for Elias. Hesitating at first, the boy's small hand brushed against his arm. Elias bent down, letting the boy grip his finger. A soft laugh escaped from the child, bright and innocent, and even Salith allowed herself a small smile. "You are brave," Elias said to the child. "Even if you don't know it yet." Salith's voice was full of pride. "He carries hope, my son." Last of line. "But he is strong, because he has you." She looked at Elias, gratitude and awe mixed in her expression. As the evening wore on, Elias and Salith began to speak more openly. She told him of her world, a planet of towering cities, vast armies, and ancient knowledge. She explained how her people had fallen to betrayal and overwhelming enemies, and how her child's blood carried a key to something her enemies desperately sought. Elias listened, fascinated. He had never imagined that so much could be hidden in a single life, that one child could hold the fate of an empire in his tiny veins. But he also saw the fear behind Salith's words. The fear of losing her son, the fear of failing, and the fear that no one would come to help. "You are not alone anymore," Elias said firmly. "We face them together. You, your child, and me." Salith looked at him, eyes wide, as if the words themselves were a revelation. Together, human courage. As the night deepened, Elias taught Salith a few simple tricks for defending herself. They practiced quietly, using small drones and dummy weapons. She caught on quickly, her royal training showing through her human-adapted skills. Her movements were precise, deliberate, and filled with determination to protect her child. The child, meanwhile, began to explore the safe areas of the shelter, crawling and laughing, bringing unexpected moments of joy to both adults. Elias found himself laughing too, watching the small human-like interactions bridge the gap between worlds. Salith joined in, her laughter soft and melodic, a sound Elias would remember long after the danger passed. "I never thought I would see joy again," she admitted quietly one night, brushing a glowing strand of hair from the child's face. "Even in hiding, even in fear, this boy brings light." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "That's why we fight. For moments like this. For those who can't defend themselves. Humans are stubborn that way. We stand when it matters." The night stretched on, and for a few precious hours the trio found peace. The bond between them grew stronger, built on trust, courage, and the shared knowledge that danger was still waiting outside. Salith learned to rely on Elias, and he in turn learned that even the smallest life could inspire the greatest determination. Outside, the stars watched silently, indifferent to the struggles below. Inside, humanity and alien royalty had found a fragile unity. The child's laughter echoed through the tunnels, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Elias realized that the fight ahead would not just be about survival, it would be about protecting what made life worth fighting for. And in that quiet moment, he knew one thing clearly. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because sometimes courage was not about strength alone. It was about standing with those who could not stand for themselves. The morning air was tense, carrying a strange metallic hum that made Elias's skin crawl. From the hilltops and valleys beyond the shelter, shadows moved, dozens of them. The alien mercenaries had returned, larger in number and better armed than the previous day. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle, scanning the horizon. This was no longer a test. It was a siege. Salith held her child tightly, watching from the shelter entrance. Her expression was calm, but her glowing eyes betrayed her worry. "They come. Stronger," she said softly. "Much stronger." "They think numbers give them victory," Elias replied. "We'll see about that." He checked the sensors one last time, confirming the placement of explosives, tripwires, and automated drones. Every inch of the terrain had been used to their advantage. The mercenaries advanced cautiously, firing energy pulses that lit up the valley in sharp bursts. Elias triggered a remote explosive, sending rocks and debris into the air. One of the attackers staggered, revealing the precision of his traps. Automated turrets activated, sending electrical charges toward the intruders. Chaos erupted, but Elias remained calm, directing the defense from his concealed vantage points. Salith crouched beside him, guiding the drones toward the attackers. Her royal training came alive as she coordinated movements, predicting enemy strategies with startling accuracy. "Here," she called, pointing to a narrow pass where the hunters were trying to flank them. Elias followed her instructions, deploying another set of traps. One by one, the mercenaries fell into nets or were shocked by hidden devices. Despite their superior technology, the aliens were careful, cautious, and unwilling to risk their lives recklessly. Elias knew it would only be a matter of time before they adapted. He could not afford to be careless. Every move had to count. Hours passed in a tense back and forth. Elias and Salith moved through the underground tunnels, emerging only briefly to strike or redirect traps. The child, safe and asleep, remained their most precious responsibility. Each time a mercenary fell, Elias felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief for the moment, dread for the inevitable continuation of the fight. At one point, a small team of hunters discovered the false path he had created. Elias triggered a series of explosions, funneling them into a narrow canyon where automated drones swarmed. Sparks flew as electrical charges disabled their suits temporarily. Salith observed, impressed. "Human mind." "Cleverer than sword," she said quietly. Elias gave a small smile, his focus never breaking. Brains can beat brawn if you use the right traps. That's what humans do. As night fell, the mercenaries regrouped and attempted a coordinated assault directly on the shelter. Elias led Salith and her child into the deepest section of the tunnels, where they could remain hidden while he monitored the attackers. He triggered hidden alarms and lights, creating illusions of movement to confuse them further. Salith's voice was calm, but there was urgency. "We cannot hide forever. They will adapt." "Fine path," Elias nodded. "I know, But right now they are still learning. We buy time with every move, and time is what we need. From their hidden vantage point, they watched as the attackers tried multiple approaches. Mines detonated, traps activated, and drones attacked with precision. Some mercenaries were disabled, others injured, but none were able to reach the shelter. Elias's strategy of defense in depth was holding. Hours turned into the late night, and the mercenaries finally pulled back, unwilling to continue without suffering more losses. Elias took a moment to catch his breath, looking at Salith and the sleeping child. Their bond had grown stronger through the fight. Each of them had risked life and limb, and in the process they had learned to trust each other implicitly. "You were amazing," Salith said quietly. "Together, we survive. You, human courage, stronger than many armies I knew." Elias shrugged, though a small smile appeared. "I just did what had to be done. That's all humans do. Stand when others can't. Protect those who cannot protect themselves." Salith reached out and touched his arm lightly, a gesture of respect and gratitude. "I thought humans weak, but you show strength not in war but in heart and clever mind. My son, safe because of you." Elias looked down at the child sleeping peacefully. He knew that no empire, no army, could match the determination that had grown from this simple bond. They were more than hunter and prey, more than human and alien. They were a team, united by the need to protect life. Outside, the stars glimmered faintly in the sky, silent witnesses to the struggle below. The storm had passed, leaving a calm that belied the battles waged. Inside, a human and alien princess and her child had survived a siege, proving that courage, ingenuity, and trust could overcome even the deadliest odds. Elias realized that the next battle would be harder, more dangerous, and perhaps decisive. But for now they had survived, and in the quiet that followed he understood something important. Humanity was not defined by strength alone. It was defined by the courage to stand when others could not. And tonight, humanity had stood. The sun rose slowly over the valley, painting the barren landscape in shades of gold and gray. Elias stood at the entrance of the shelter, scanning the horizon. The alien mercenaries were back, more numerous and better armed than before. This was the final assault, the one that would decide whether Salith and her child survived or were lost forever. Salith held her child close, her eyes glowing softly with determination. "They will not leave us alive," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "They underestimate what humans can do when protecting those who cannot protect themselves." He adjusted the rifle on his shoulder, checking the traps and drones one last time. Every device was armed, every pathway considered. Today, ingenuity and courage would be their greatest weapons. As the first wave of mercenaries advanced, Elias triggered the first set of traps. Explosions rocked the valley, throwing debris into the air. Automated drones swarmed, delivering shocks to the enemy suits while hidden turrets fired with deadly precision. Chaos erupted, disorienting the attackers. Salith watched, awed, as Elias moved through the battlefield with calculated precision. She had expected heroics, but not this level of strategy. Every move seemed to anticipate the enemy's next step. "Human mind." "Brilliant," she muttered. The mercenaries regrouped and pressed forward, careful now to avoid the obvious traps. Elias had expected this, and he guided them into a canyon where he had prepared the most devastating trap. Explosives buried under loose rocks erupted as the attackers passed, sending them sprawling and cutting off their advance. Drones and turrets followed up immediately, keeping them pinned. Even with superior numbers, the attackers were faltering. Their confidence wavered as one by one. Their systems were disabled and their forces fragmented. Elias moved quickly, using the tunnels and hidden paths to strike where they least expected. Salith, inspired by his courage, assisted in her own way. She guided the drones, monitored the traps, and even helped redirect debris to create barriers. Her royal training and quick thinking amplified Elias's human ingenuity. For the first time, she felt that the combination of human resourcefulness and alien skill could overcome nearly any threat. Hours passed in a tense dance of survival. The mercenaries pressed relentlessly, but Elias's traps and strategies left them frustrated and disorganized. Finally, he triggered the ultimate plan, a chain reaction in the old mining facility that sent a massive shockwave across the valley. The remaining enemy ships were damaged, their landing craft destroyed and the surviving mercenaries fled, leaving the battlefield behind. Elias exhaled, lowering his weapon. The valley was quiet now, only the dust settling and the faint hum of his shelter's generators filling the air. He looked at Salith and her child. They were safe. For now the nightmare was over. Salith approached him, her glowing eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. You saved us, not just me, not just my son. You saved hope. Elias shrugged modestly. I did what I had to do. Humans fight hardest for those who cannot fight for themselves. That's all there is to it. She smiled faintly, brushing a hand over her child's hair. I thought humans were weak, small, fragile, but now I know. You are strong. Strong in heart and mind. My people will remember this. The child, sensing the tension had passed, smiled and reached for Elias. He bent down, letting the boy grip his finger. For a moment, the horrors of battle faded, replaced by a simple, pure connection. The innocence of life worth protecting. Salith turned to Elias, her voice quiet but firm. When we return to my world, when I speak to those who remain, they will know humanity stands for the desperate. When all others turn away, humans do not. You will be remembered. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The battles, the fear, the endless planning, all had been for this small family, this fragile hope. And in protecting them, he had learned something greater about humanity itself. Courage was not about armies or weapons. It was about standing for those who could not stand alone. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, reflecting faintly on the valley below. Salith, Elias, and her child stood together at the shelter's entrance, a small group against a vast universe. And yet, in that moment, they were stronger than any empire, any army, any force that sought to harm them. For the first time in days, Salith allowed herself to laugh softly, holding her child close. Elias smiled too, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. They had survived, and together, they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming danger, courage, trust, and ingenuity could prevail. Elias knew the universe would continue to challenge them, that new dangers would emerge. But he also knew that as long as humanity could stand, as long as people were willing to protect the desperate and the innocent, hope would never die. And so, under the quiet stars of the frontier world, a human, an alien princess, and her child shared a simple truth. When courage meets compassion, no force in the galaxy can overcome the will to protect life. Humanity had stood first. Humanity had won.